welcome to Director's Cut. With me today, we've got Thomas Erikson, author, lecturer and mentor of the famous Surrounded by Idiots series. Also with us is Matthew Overy, co-head of research and COO of CLSA Research. Welcome both.
Thank you.
So Thomas, I have read the book. I've actually been recommended it by my mentor, Matt, and he's been recommended it by his boss, Sean. And could you, for those that haven't read the book, could you quickly explain to us in summary what the book's about?
Well, the book Surrounded by Idiots is obviously not about idiots, but it's about that feeling when you sit around the table, meeting a group of people, taking good notes, trying to check the agenda, trying to understand, listen carefully, and making your points, and arguing your view on the topic at hand. But when you leave the meeting, you have this interesting sense of being surrounded by idiots. And you know, interestingly enough, some people seems to be surrounded by more idiots than others. That's interesting. Sometimes some people are idiot magnets, they draw weirdos and lunatics to themselves. And the book is about how to get rid of that feeling, how to actually understand that sometimes I am the idiot in somebody's story. That could be the case.
Well, that's why I was recommended the book. So, I mean, look, when we were talking before this interview, you were mentioning that you recognised who I was straight away, and then you then promptly, rightly recognised you. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, that's a matter of training. I've been doing this for a couple of decades, so it's not extremely hard. But some people are easier to read than others, and you might be one of them.
Apparently.
It could be the case. I don't know. Have you read me so far? I mean, you read the book. Do you know who I am?
Your colours give you away.
Okay, blue and blue.
There's a little bit of red down here.
Yes, it's a part of the story, but it's absolutely not the full story.
Are any of the colours harder to pick up on than others, do you find? I mean, red feels, and for those not familiar with the book, red means it's got dominance associated with it, right? And that's obviously quite an, I guess, extroverted, very visible kind of colour. But
yes.
The other ones maybe harder?
Well, extroverts are easier to read because they are more expressive. The red ones are more like this, and the yellow ones are, you know, the happy ones, the sunny ones, the shiny ones. People are saying, you know, have you seen the weather? And even if it's raining, yeah, but the sun is always shining somewhere. You recognize these characters.
Yeah.
Green and blues are more introverts. Blues are these stone-faced people, and you can see that, obviously. You see somebody never smiles, look at you thoroughly, you know, and making mental notes. Usually people say the green factor might be the hardest one to recognize, because they are sort of smooth and just going along, so you hardly notices them sometimes. But they are also in majority, so they are everywhere.
Interesting.
That's a non-answer. I heard that too. It's a sort of a, I don't know.
May I ask, is it really hard for you to change characters? If you were a certain colour, is it possible for you to completely adapt to another one, say for example in the work setting?
In a couple of hours, half a day, you can do it, obviously. Apparently you can act blue even though you are yellow, quite opposites, because you have to, sometimes you have to. But I usually don't recommend people to violate their character. If you have a certain personality, be you. Sounds like a cliche, I understand that, but if you try to be somebody that you're not, you're going to feel bad. After a week or two, you're going to actually feel physically, not injured, but you're going to feel really stressed. Because if you can't be you, then who are you really? So that's not a recommendation at all.
Well, we're laughing because we just had a chat just before this interview about changing who I am.
We did a little bit. So obviously we read the book, but of course you don't just read the book. You then try and action the book as
yes.
well. I mean, that's the whole point of reading it. And so we have actively tried to use the techniques that are in here. And one thing that was kind of interesting to me, thinking about this and thinking about some of the challenges I've seen with people, particularly in the workplace, is some of the things that can be really troublesome for people throughout their careers and interacting with others is the things that you're unaware of that other people are aware of about you. And sometimes they can be quite destructive or quite troublesome over time, particularly if you're not surrounded by candid people who sometimes give you the feedback that can be quite hard to give. Is there a way that you can use your self-identification maybe in this book as a colour to try and understand those unknown unknowns about yourself and to really use that as a source maybe of personal growth?
That's an excellent question. I mean, self-awareness is about understanding who you are, understanding how you present yourself to the room, to the world, but also to understand what everybody sees when they meet you. And some, as you just mentioned, some of these parts are quite blurry, maybe unhidden to us. I think it's important. You can never probably reach 100% self-awareness. I am quite self-aware after 25 years in this business, but probably there are, blind spots within me that I will maybe recognize and have to acknowledge, usually in the wrong setting. That's usually what happens. Somebody says, but now you did it again. You're right. You told me 12 years ago, I should have gotten that before. But you can work on yourself. You can take the assessment. You can do the 4-color analysis, of course, and then you can learn, because you're going to get a protocol that tells you this is what you probably don't know about you. And then you can ask people for feedback. Is this correct? Would you say that is actually me? If you have people with you're in a good relationship with honest people who actually will tell you the truth, because some people will and some people won't. Some people will just pat you on your shoulder and say, yeah, no, you're good as you are. You don't worry, don't change anything. That is usually not 100% true. Mm. But if you have an honest relationship with somebody, it could be a colleague, a friend, a family member, it could be anyone, they would tell you the truth and say, yeah, you're kind of bossy, or you're kind of, changing opinion all the time, or you're kind of cracking jokes when you actually should shut up. Mm. You could adjust a little bit there in a certain context, and then you might actually listen to this. Sometimes that's good advice. Mm.
Yes, it's interesting. When reading a book like yours, it feels quite easy to fall into kind of confirmation bias and read the colour and say, oh, those good bits are definitely me. But those bits, oh, no, that can't be me. But
can't be me. You got it wrong there,
That open mind and trying to test that with people. Actually, is this me? Am I like this? And they go, well, actually, you are a little bit like, ooh, okay, I didn't kind of know that. That's, I think, where you can find quite a lot of personal growth.
I mean, self-awareness is also painful, obviously. When I was a young man, I got my first managing position at the age of 24. I was really smart at 24. As you can see from my face, it's been a while. It's been a while, and I'm not that smart anymore. But, it was good to be so smart, because I thought I had it down all the time. I knew everything about everyone. And I messed it up. And mostly people said, you're not taking this. I'm an ex-banker. This was in the Swedish bank system. And I was making jokes with customers and clients absolutely at the wrong time, in the wrong moment. They were asking for guidance and clarification. I cracked jokes, about money. You shouldn't do that ever. But I did, because I thought it was funny. It was probably funny for me. So that's one part. That would be my yellow factor. So these days I have to control the yellowishness within me, because it is there. I can use it on stage. I can use it in a certain, in a conversation like this, but I can't use it everywhere. That's one part of quite some painful self-awareness I achieved there. And people gave me feedback and said, you're overdoing it. Could you just take it down a few? Don't do these things again, ever, please. Painful, because those idiots. But I learned. What a bunch of fools. What do they know?
But if you have that view where you think people are idiots, why would you want to change?
That is, of course, the problem, because people change when they get a problem with it. People don't change because you tell me you should change, But you change. Why should I change? I'm perfect. You better change yourself, So people, when they find themselves in trouble, when they mess it up over and over and over again, which I did, apparently quite a lot, when you are reaching, problem levels so high and so frequent that you actually are messing up your own career. I was on the wrong path, absolutely, definitely on the wrong path. So I had to make up my mind. I actually remember, if I may tell you a quick story, I was doing so bad, and when I realized this isn't working, so I went to my boss's boss, 2 levels up, and said, you better take me out from this equation, because I don't know what I'm doing. And he said, his response was, you better stay put, Sonny, because your boss is even worse than you. She's not even here, So I managed to stay there for a year, and then, when you sit around the coffee table, when you are leaving, the team they hand you a present, and, have a piece of cake, and good luck on your next step in your career. They didn't give me anything. I gave them a plant and said, I'm terribly sorry, I don't know what happened. And at the end of this awkward meeting, some lady felt so bad, she said, yeah, it got a little bit better at the end, at least. It was horrible. And then the HR department called me up and said, fancy a personality test now, wouldn't you? And I said, sure. And they told me, this is you. It was a horrible read, but it was true. Is this what people see when they meet me? Uh-huh. Do you want to talk about it? They said. And I said, I better do that. That was a game changer for me.
So how does knowing your color, your personality, affect your behavior? Do some people dig in their heels?
Well, it depends on the feedback. I mean, let's say that you read this, just an example, just a crazy example. And people say, well, you're really fast, you're effective, but you're also too fast and we can't keep up. Should you dig in your heels and say, no, you're slow? Or should you say, okay, I can take it down a little bit. If you speed up, we can meet somewhere in between. That could be a conversation to have, I guess. But usually people, self-awareness is a funny thing because most people think they are self-aware. It's actually something I usually talk about. There was an interesting meta-study made by an American psychiatrist, Tasha Eurich, I think her name was. She asked a couple of thousands of people, are you self-aware? And then had them to describe themselves. Turns out 95% is above average. What do you know? It's like asking men, are you a good driver? We're all above average, right? So self-awareness is a delicate and sometimes a bit rare thing because obviously that's not true. Most people have so big blind spots that they don't even know what to adjust. So you're going to end up in a confusing conversation about if I should manage some adjustments, some corrections in my behavior, what would it be? Maybe I should speed up and somebody else said, no, you should slow down. Who's right and who's wrong? Well, it depends. There are no straightforward questions. Do this and you're fine. You have to look at the context. I'm sorry if that's confusing, but you have to look at the context.
The lesson from that 95% study then probably is that actually being self-aware is admitting that you're not self-aware.
It's like asking, I saw this in a British tabloid a couple of months ago, are you a liar? 20 questions. It's a silly test because who will be honest? Well, honest people will say, yeah, I lie sometimes. And they're going to look like liars. And the liars obviously going to say, I never lie. So what are you going to do with this? Depends on who you're asking, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, so one aspect of this that I was very interested in reading the book, particularly with being in this region. So I've been in Hong Kong now for 15 years, worked across the Asia-Pacific region for a long time, was previously in Europe for quite some time as well. And I'm always curious and interested with frameworks like this and how they apply cross-culturally, how they apply with different kind of nationalities, cultures. There's lots of nuances in there where, do you see, I guess a couple of things, do you think this is kind of universally cross-culturally applicable? I guess would be kind of number one. And the second part of the question would almost be, do you feel there's kind of any more, maybe you've got data around more dominant traits in certain cultures than others, more dominant colours in certain cultures? You see more red in a certain locale?
Well, interestingly enough, we have data on individual levels on every continent. We have data from close to 50 languages, and the numbers varies, but very, very little. We have equal number of reds, yellows, greens, and blues, regardless of what country you're in. If it's the United States, or home in Sweden, or here in Hong Kong, or Australia, India, Germany, Poland, Norway, everywhere, we have the same balance, which is interesting. Because I did not know that 20 years ago, so I learned quite a lot. Because when I come here, people say, oh, I am so yellow, oh, I am so red, It's the same conversation as in, I don't know, Denmark, which is fascinating. People are obviously people all over the globe, which is good news. The problematic news is obviously we have a culture filter on top of everything. Some sort of, in Sweden, we have a green blanket. I'm mentioning Sweden because I am Swedish. Everybody, are conflict avert. Everybody, but a lot of people. Our culture is, closing our fist in a pocket and saying, yeah, the dinner was excellent. I'm not coming here ever again. And then we give them great tips, but we won't ever, come back because who wants that conflict? That's a Swedish way of doing it. If you go to Southern Europe, people are more extrovert, more yellowish, but it's a cultural thing. If you get to know the individual beneath the surface, he or she will be the same everywhere. You have to scratch the surface a little bit. Same thing here in Hong Kong, or probably, I don't know what the culture is because I haven't been here more than 10 hours. So what do I know? 15 years in, you probably know what it is. But the culture can be tricky to deal with. But when you sit around a table, 4 or 5 people, you pretty easily see who these people are, and you can have a conversation about anything. And you can discuss the colors as we do now. We never met before, but we have a joyful conversation about this topic that is very generic. I mean, the book is translated into 62, I think, languages.
Right.
There's a reason for it, because it's a generic message. People are people all over the globe. I think it's fantastic, really. What do you think?
I think a little bit about what you said at the start, actually before this interview, which is that you can often make misinterpretations of people's characters and their types. And Is there a way to avoid that? And is there a way that people sometimes use that to their advantage?
Use what to their advantage?
So say, for example, you know that someone is a blue. You might use that to your advantage because you know that they're analytical. So you might misdirect work towards their way, but he could also be a yellow. So he could be very people oriented. So if you box someone in that character, in that category, is that a benefit?
It could be a benefit. There's also a risk, obviously. There's a risk in everything, I would say. If you misunderstand somebody, I mean, I meet a lot of people saying, I can pretty easily assess an extrovert, which would be a yellow and red person. Active-oriented, gets energy from acting out things and being active, basically. But then I say, well, you know, these introverts, I don't understand. They don't do anything. They don't say. They just sit there. And I say, well, that's a lot to analyze, really, because is it a relation-oriented individual? Or how would I know? Well, ask questions. The best thing to do, how to understand people, if you don't know, go green, meaning close your mouth, open your ears, be an active listener, be a good team member, take notes, observe and see what is happening in the room. Because if you go green, you will notice things. If you go yellow, you won't notice anything because then you will be doing all the talking. And that's not a good idea if you want to analyze people. But sometimes I've guessed wrong. Some people have 3 colors. I am one of them. People usually are struggling to plot me into the matrix, so to speak. I have people in my family still saying, I really don't know you. And I say, but we're cousins. We've known each other for 50 years. You know, yeah, but who are you really? You're complicated. My wife agrees with my cousin.
Wow.
Your wife agrees. Wow.
My wife agrees with my cousin. You are strange, Thomas. No, but seriously, I have 3 colors, which makes me, I have 3 high bars, which makes me, I mean, I can go back and forth. I can go blue with you, I can go red with you, and I can go yellow with, you know, the yellow guys in here.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with green. No green whatsoever. I'm terribly sorry. I blame that on my mother's side. They took all the green. So no green left for me. So.
If I could just squeeze actually maybe just one more question as well, which is actually, because it's a nice segue, I think, into towards what I was going to ask, was around group dynamics. And in a group, it's easy to read the book and think about, okay, my relationship, my interactions with a particular person, a particular colour. But in a group, you obviously have a rainbow there. There is a whole colour palette in front of you to deal with.
Not necessarily, but hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah, very much hopefully in some cases.
It could be only blue in the room, you know, very quiet.
And then you have a very stressful room, perhaps.
Yeah, but nobody cares, so that's fine. It's just another way to communicate it, you know, raise your voice a little bit.
So is it fair to say then that with a group dynamic, actually, you've maybe got to try and find that green within yourself a little bit? Is green one of the better, is there any better colour that works as someone being in a group situation?
Well, it depends on the objective, I guess. I mean, if it's about cooperation, green is certainly a good factor to have because they are about team play. They are good team players. They are excellent listeners. They are very humble. They are letting people into the discussion. They don't interrupt as much as red and yellow people do. They don't get so carried away. And then again, they are good at taking responsibility, saying, okay, I can do that. Give me those whatever things has to be solved. Unfortunately, they are not as good to deliver as they are to promise to deliver because they will be stressed out if they take too much on themselves, which they will because they can't say no. So it depends, again, a little bit. I would say the best team is with the biggest diversity, all the colors. Let's say, call it the rainbow. The challenge here you have that you need a team leader who can deal with all the colors at the same time, regardless of who she or he is. That's kind of the trick here. Because you need to address red, yellow, green, and blue in 3 sentences and to achieve everyone's attention at the same time, which is not an easy thing because, well, people are different. But if you have that kind of team leader, the rainbow team would be the best one, I think. Usually the recommendation. Well, of course it is. You get different kinds of perspectives and problem solving and everything, so that's a good thing.
So that's your team?
My team is very, very diverse, yeah. So we have interesting discussions, we have a lot of argumenting as well. We have quite a few red people because we're entrepreneurs, so we like to, you know, we like to keep the pace up.
Yeah,
we like to get things done, and sometimes we mess it up, and then we have time to adjust and and reassess and everything. So yeah. What was the question again? We shouldn't talk about my team. We should talk about your team.
Well, Thomas, I think we're just about out of time. But firstly, thank you very much for attending the CLSA Investor Forum.
Thank you.
Fantastic book. I certainly took out a lot of it. I know Alex does. It's an active part of our conversations in the office now.
Excellent.
Sometimes for better, mainly for better. Sometimes we get a bit stressful.
Sometimes it's quite annoying.
It is sometimes, but it's all very productive. And look, I think there's a super amount of positivity in there, particularly in the thought that in a world where there's a tendency, and it's very easy for humans to group people together into stereotypes in some way by culture or various other dimensions. The fact that this is so ubiquitous across culture and across the world really speaks to the individuality and how we're all kind of the same underneath, which I think is a fantastic message to take away. So
may I give you a word to go, so to speak?
Sure.
One thing that I have learned working with these matters is, even though I'm right, you don't have to be wrong, actually. Sometimes we just need to pay a little bit more attention and be cautious in relationships, professional and private ones.
Fantastic. Great way to end it. And on that note, thank you very much, and goodbye.